Welcome back, class, to BA Essentials Part 3. And this will be our final class in the basics group, Business Analyst Basic. Before this class, we have studied about other documentations like MOM and traceability metrics. So whoever is watching on YouTube, you can go back. I will also give a link to those videos. You can watch those videos to learn more about other documentation. This class is not dependent on the other class, so you can continue watching this one as well. So today we are going to study in detail about the BRD, Business Requirement Document. This document is one of the most important documents in software industry or in a BA lives. This is the document where as a BA, you will capture every detailed business requirement, say it a functional requirement, non-functional requirement, any user interface requirement, hardware requirement, software requirement, assumptions, constraints, dependencies, everything in detail. This is the only document that you will be writing for the business. This document actually serves as a contract between the development team and the business. This document will serve you like a great purposes in different things, like for the project planning things. If we have the requirement gathered in detail, based on the requirement, the project manager will go ahead and plan things further. Like what resources do we need to complete the project, what timeline is going to take, what is the budget is going to look like, and we need in this doc for the project. So this document will serve the purpose because everything will happen once we know what needs to be done. If we are not clear on the requirement, we will not be able to plan things further. So in order for us to plan things further and execute and monitor and control and close that project, we need to have a great BRD written. So as I said initially, this is going to be one of the most important documents for you, and you will see yourself mostly working on this document. So you have to be really focused on this class. And when you practice writing BRDs, you have to be really focused on writing a great BRD. Now, what do you mean by great BRD? What is the qualities of a good BRD? What we should use, what we should not use, like, consider, do not consider, avoid. We will study everything in this class. And I'm also going to give you some sample document so that you can use it. So let's start. Let's see. What is a BRD? A business requirement document is a formal document that outlines the business requirements of a software development project. It typically includes a detailed description of the problems that needs to be solved. Obviously, the problems as in the requirement. Requirement could be a problem statement as well. Could be something new, could be some existing things that we have to modify. So this document details everything for the business and for the development team. Now, on top of that, we can also create a system requirement document, which is SRD or SRS, which is like nothing but the technical translation of this business requirement documentation. So some of the companies, they use SRD separately. Some of the companies, they do not. They just simply go by the BRD and they start moving towards the solution part of those things. Once the BRD is signed off, they start working on the solutions and other stuff like what cost is going to take, what time is going to take, and how and what solution are going to provide you. So they can start working on this BRD itself. They don't need SRS. Some of the org, they also have the SRS. So it's just nothing but a little bit technical version so that you can technically detail things there for your development team. So a BRD is very important in software development projects that we have just said. It serves as a critical communication tool between the business stakeholders and the development team. Obviously, business is asking something, business is going to go and review something, development team is going to go and review something. This is the only document where everybody will be coming and looking at the information. So this serves as a great communication tool. Since everybody is working on this common ground, the common goal of the software project, so everybody will be like, kind of involved around this document only. Everybody will be here coming, and they will all have a common understanding of what needs to be delivered and what need not to be delivered, both of them. This document tells everything, what is in scope and what is not in scope. So this document should clearly define what business needs, should clearly define, no vague terms, Nothing miscellaneous kind of thing, nothing unclear. Everything has to be clearly defined. What is the scope? What is the objective? What goals are we going to achieve after, from this project? This document should tell you everything very clearly written. And you also need to write what is not in scope. If you write what is not in scope, this will help you avoid scope creep. Now, what is scope creep? We have discussed this a lot in the previous class, but let me give you one example. Scope creep is like frequently changing of the requirement. Let's say a business has given you something, and now during the project, during the execution phase, business is asking you to add something, right? And business doesn't want to go with that change management processes. So what will happen if you accept? This will be called as a scope creep. Now there's another term, gold plating. Gold plating is nothing but the same thing coming from the development team. You or a BA, your development team is trying to give something more that business will be really happy. However, that is not the actual ask from the business, and you're still going to go ahead and add, considering this will not impact your quality, timeline, cost, and everything. Even though this will not impact, this will be considered as a gold plating, that you're trying to please and happy someone. This is a big no in the software industry, so should not do this thing. So this document will help you prevent all those scope creeps and probably gold platings, because we know we have written, agreed, approved what needs to be done. So this document is very important. I'm just giving you some of the good examples. And obviously, as I said, once we have the requirement captured, understood, now we can plan how long it's going to take to complete the project, what resources we need, right? What is the high level budget, or maybe the detailed budget planning can also be done based on the requirements. So these are some of the high level points that I've given you. What is BRD and why this BRD is important? Now let's go and see in detail about different sections of this BRD. So what are some key components of a BRD? Before I go ahead, let me give you a very clear understanding. A BRD may have a lot of sections. Not all the companies are going to use every section of the BRD. This is completely configurable. This depends on what company are you working and what document version or what document type they're using. Different companies may have a different style of this document. Even sometimes, if you see within one company project base, the team uses a different version of the documentation. Now, some of the companies, they have a different department, they work on the documentation and they release an approved format of the documentation that everyone has to use within the company, no matter what. So you will be using that document, and that document may have different sections. Some of the org, they have that flexibility that teams can change the documentation. They can add, remove some of the sections. Perfectly fine. Having said, wherever you are working, you have to make sure you're complying with the company policies and company documentation processes. Simple thing. Now, here in this class, we are going to look at some of the key elements that you may find common across all the documentation wherever you are working, right? So, on a high level, a BRD may contain, the background of the project, the scope of the project, assumptions, business goals, executive summary, all those things. Let us see some of the main common things, common elements that you will always find in most of the documentation wherever you work, doesn't matter. So it has one section that called executive summary. Now, you may not find this executive summary everywhere in all the documentation. Some of the companies, they may have this. Executive summary is written for the executives. Executives as in the senior management group. And as I said, senior management group, the senior management will not have that much time to go ahead and read the whole documentations. So what normally we come up with like a one-page statement. Within one page, we try to explain on a very high level what is the project all about, what is the purpose of this project, what are the different goals and objectives we are going to achieve once this project is done, completed, and what is the scope of this project. This summary may also include a high-level budget and high-level time, and may not include as well, because this is going to be a business requirement document and business will review it. So I'm not sure who this executive is. If this executive is from the business side, probably we may end up writing those high-level budgets and everything. If this is being written for the internal software development team, probably we may not write all those high level budgets and everything. But time high level, I don't see any problem writing high level time. Now you may ask, we are in a process of requirement gathering. How would we know what time is going to take? We don't know what is the requirement all about. We'll have to analyze things and see. That's true. It's a ballpark effort, right? It has like, minus plus 75% variation, somewhere minus plus 50% variation, somewhere minus plus 25% variations. So you always have that variation in place when you're giving a high level or, you know, like a helicopter view of all those assessments, how long it's going to take. It's like a ballpark effort, not a final effort. And then we will have a background section. This background section will tell what was the background of this project, why this project has come, what was the business need that we wanted to achieve, any industry specific needs, anything that has brought this project into picture. So we have to document all those things in the background so that whoever is reading the document can understand, okay, these are the reasons why this project has come into existence, and this is the reason why are we going ahead and working on this project. Now we have some business goals and objectives. Obviously, what is the objective we are going to achieve? What is the business goals after this project? This section will tell them, explain them in detail. When the project is completed, these are some of the objectives we will be achieving. This is the business goal we are going to achieve. And that goal could be anything that depends upon what project you're working on. And the section of detail will change depending upon the nature of the project. Scope. This is a very important section. This, I believe, a scope is something you will find. This will be like common across the documentation. What format you're working, where you're working, doesn't matter. You always have to write the scope. This is the ultimate purpose of this document, to write what is in a scope and what is not in a scope. So this is scope section will tell in detail what is in a scope and what is something we are not going to achieve and complete. Now, under scope section, there could be various subsections. And within those subsections, you will fill up all those details. In some of the documentation, what I have seen is people have functional and non-functional requirements within the scope, like subsections. Like, let's say section 1 is scope, section 1.1 could be functional requirement, section 1.2 could be non-functional requirement. I've also seen some of the documentation where these are written separately, Scope is just telling on a high level in plain, simple English language, what is something we are going to achieve. And any specific thing that as a BA you would like to highlight, these are something we will not achieve purposefully. Now, why would you write all those things? I have given you the example before. Let me just revise your memory. Say an example, a business has given you one of the requirements as a mandatory requirement, and you did your research analysis with the team and you found out there's some technical dependencies. We cannot do that piece of the work, the requirement. We cannot deliver. You came up with some containment, some workaround, and you explained the business, okay, this is something we cannot do because this has this technical dependencies. However, I'm going to go ahead and do this thing for you who will moreover the same thing, but in a different way. Business might say yes to you. So you would specifically want to write that thing, okay, this is not in scope. Because you don't want to see the surprises during the UAT, user acceptance testing. Business can tell you, hey, I gave you that requirement, why I don't see it here? You will not have proof to back up your team and yourself. So you need to write those things specifically. Okay, this is not in scope. Or anything, even business is not giving you, but certainly this is going to come up in the future, and that is not possible technically. So you would go ahead and specify those things. So long story short, you will not write everything which is not required. You will only write those things under not in scope where you believe or you have encountered those situations that, okay, this is going to come up. So let me better explain clearly in the documentation so that everybody has the same understanding. This was actually the request, but we have said no to this because of these reasons, so that you're safe, your team is safe, and your project is safe. So that is the reason why you would want to also write what is not in scope. Now you will have a functional requirement section. This section will tell the main functionality of the software that you are going to achieve, the main functions of that product or that software. We have given many examples, like let's say your project is pen. So what is the main function of pen? Pen should write. So that writing is a main function. So you will write as one of the functional requirement, this pen should write. Now, you will also write non-functional requirement. In the same example, you will write the as a non-functional requirement, like the pen should write blue, the pen should write in red, the pen should any color, or maybe you can also define the thickness. This should not be more than 0.2 mm or whatever. So every requirement that is supporting the main functional requirement becomes a non-functional requirement. Having said, these non-functional requirement may not have direct impact on the functionality. This will support that main functionality. So that is called non-functional requirement. So you will have different sections in the documentation where you will write in detail all the functional requirements that is required from the business. And you will also write all non-functional requirement that is supporting the main functional requirements. This is very important for you to write non-functional requirement as well. So under functional requirement documentation, you may end up writing simple, plain language, English language, the text that people can understand. And it is also highly advisable that you write some of the diagrams, which will help understand more about the requirement. So whenever you find an opportunity, try to add some diagrams, wireframes, could be some simple UI diagrams, could be some use case diagrams, maybe sequence diagrams. This is what you will study in UML when you will study them probably next couple of weeks. So those are very important and advisable to add if you can. If not needed, do not try to overload things just for nothing. Just one-liner statement requirement, and any diagrams are not required, and you unnecessarily trying to add things. Don't do this. Do only when it is required. And when it is required, do not avoid and escape it. Do it. Some sections could be like acceptance criteria, assumption, dependencies, and constraints. Now, acceptance criteria is nothing but what measures and what terms the business will be accepting those requirements. Those could be acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria may directly be dealing and talking, or maybe the copy of the functional requirements. Say an example, in our example, the pen example, the pen should write. Acceptance criteria should be the pen should write. The same thing, Obviously, if pen doesn't write, this will not be accepted. True, that could be directly a functional requirement written into acceptance criteria. Could be different as well. Say an example, I am saying I need a pen, some specific brand. I need a pen that should write, but that pen should belong to some specific brand. That is my acceptance criteria. So you brought the pen, right? You gave me the pen is writing, everything is fine, but the pen doesn't belong to the brand I wanted. So I will not accept, the business will not accept that pen. So that acceptance criteria also includes, apart from writing features, this should belong to a certain brand. I just give you a generic example. This may not be a perfect example here. I just give a generic example. Another example, the same brand thing. Business wants you to buy a phone. Buying a phone is a project, not building. So business said, okay, the mobile should have 100 gig space minimum, 8 gig memory, and blah, blah, all those things. And the mobile should belong to a specific brand. You brought the phone, which does actually the way business wanted, but that doesn't belong to the specific brand. Business will not accept it. Because based on the brand, the costing will change. Business is paying you, your project manager will do a cost estimation based on the brand and will give business. Business is paying you based on that assumption that you will give them that specific brand. However, the phone is working fine, but doesn't belong to the specific brand. There will be a conflict and business will not accept. So under acceptance criteria section, you will try to write all those things. Based on that, the business will accept those changes or those products or those MVPs, whatever. So having said, just to summarize, acceptance criteria may have directly all the functional requirements, may not have, may have written things differently. So that should be very much clearly written under acceptance criteria section. Otherwise, the project will be a trouble when you are going here and trying to deliver and doing a demo. Business may ask you so many things that you will not have proof. See, it is very important for you to also write the acceptance criteria agreed and approved from the business and from the team. Now, acceptance criteria should always be reviewed by the team as well. Business can ask you anything. Business can ask you, okay, deliver this phone to the moon. The development team cannot go to the moon or Mars to deliver things. So those acceptance criteria will not be accepted. So it is very important for you to understand what is business acceptance criteria, and also, is that technically possible? Is a reasonable ask? And how would you know? You have to go ahead and talk to your development team, and they will let you know if this is technically possible or not. And based on everyone's agreement, you will write that acceptance criteria, not only from the business, not only from the you, and not only from the development team. This has to be mutually agreed. That is very important for you to write. Now, acceptance criteria could be for the functional requirements and for the non-functional requirement as well. Let's say you have one section that says functional requirement, and you have 10 different functional requirements written. You may write 10 different acceptance criteria for each of those functional requirements in a section. Let's say I'm writing one section, section 1.1.1, that says acceptance criteria of the functional requirements. Now, within that, in each of the functional requirements, you will define what is the acceptance criteria and what basis this particular piece of the functional requirement will be accepted. You will write everything. Same goes to the non-functional. You will write the acceptance criteria for the non-functional requirement as well. Now, you don't always have to write all those things in detail. It depends on what kind of project you're doing. You may not even write a single thing in the document. It completely depends upon the nature of the project. You may write, you may not write. So here we are learning, if we have to write, how would we write and what we should consider. Now, there could be some assumptions and dependencies. Assumptions is like assuming. You assume some of the things, they're not clear at the beginning of the project when you're capturing the requirement. There are a lot of things that is not clear from the business. So you assume things and you will write those assumptions so that business is also aware and everybody's on the same page. Assumptions could be anything. Let's say I'm assuming the project will be delivered in agile way of working. Say an example. Business did not tell you, okay, business is not sure this will be agile or waterfall, but based on the project nature, you believe, okay, it looks like this will be done in agile way of working. So you will write those assumptions there. Now, assumptions might change. Assumptions might not impact your functional and non-functional requirement. It may also impact. That completely depends. I cannot give you like step-by-step thing that, okay, if you do step 1, 2, this will not impact. If we do step 3, 4, this will impact. No, I don't have answers in that way. Assumptions, it's just assumption. We're assuming things, and assumptions might change anytime. So whenever you write this documentation, whenever you write the assumption, you have to write in a way that doesn't impact the scope of the project. So you have to be very careful when you're writing the assumptions. Assumptions could be anything during any phase of the requirement. Could be functional requirement, could be non-functional, could be interface. You may have assumptions, and you would want to write all the assumptions in details in different sections. There could be some dependencies. Let's say we have to test something, but the test data is only accessible to the business. As a developer, we do not have those data. So what we are saying, we are writing in the dependency sections. In order for you to deliver things on time, we have to test these functional requirements by this time to achieve the target completion, the project completion date. But we have dependencies on the data, and data must be provided by business by this time. So you will write all those dependencies in detail. Business has to provide this set of data by this date in order for us to complete the testing and deliver you on time. So this is the dependencies. You will also write, if the data is not being provided, this might impact the project delivery timeline. So those dependencies you will have to write very clearly. Let's see if you do not write. Business is not agreeing on that. Business has not given you the sign off. And during the UAT, even though you're right, you don't have the data from the business to test, you could not complete the testing. Business is not going to accept that excuse. Business will say, you promised to deliver at this time and you are late. There could be some penalties as well based on the contract your company has signed. So in order for you to avoid those situations, you will make sure you're writing all those dependencies as well. It's very important. I give you one example. Dependencies could be anything depending upon the project you're working on. Make sure you find out all the dependencies, talk to your business, talk to your development team. You do your own research and analysis and see what dependencies you believe should be there and write everything. And you will review with business, with team, and probably you will like remove, add, modify something. The ultimate goal is to have all these assumptions and dependencies written clearly if there is any. If there's no, you're fine. But if there's even a single thing, you have to write. Constraints. Constraints is like more or similar to the dependencies, but it's not directly dependencies. So, an example, we have a resource constraints. I know some resource limitations are there. There's one key resource who is already working in some of the other project, and we are assuming that resource will be released by this time and this is going to start working for us. But however, we have a constraint. If the resource is not being assigned on time, the project might delay. So that is a constant you will write. Let's say business is asking a lot of things, but your management is not giving you that budget. And as a project manager, someone has come up with a budget and that is not in sync with the budget we have been assigned. So that is also a constraint. You would want to write in detail. Probably your project manager will help writing all those constraints. This document is being reviewed by everyone. So when your project manager will review this document, he or she will see, okay, there is a constraint that is directly dealing about the budget. So the person will go ahead and write that constraint for yourself or on your behalf. On his behalf, you may also write, or her behalf, you may also write. So that constraint will tell everything about the budget. Having said, this project may get delayed. We may have to do things differently because we have a budget constraint. And we may have some regulatory requirements. Let's say you are working on a software that you have seen a risk that some regulation is going to change from the government body in future. And that might also impact your project. And you may have to change some of the scope of the project just because of those regulatory requirements. You will also write all those things in detail because you don't want to see you and your team in a situation where people are pushing you and asking you, you have not done this thing before, you have not done this thing clearly. So you would want to write and specify clearly so that everyone has the same understanding and we are not in a conflict situation when we are trying to deliver or doing the UAT with business. So these are very important things you have to write and consider. Right. Any questions on this key components? Now, these are, as I said, these are some of the key components. It doesn't mean these are the only components of the BRD. You may end up seeing 50 or more than 50 key components. These are the key components that you will see common across all the documentations. Now, what else we will see in detail in next slides. So before I move ahead, any questions as of now?
Yeah, I had a question. Like you told earlier, as in the project, we do not have to assume anything. Then why do we need to include assumptions in the BRD?
Good question. There's some known unknowns, there's some unknown unknowns. There's some assumptions that we have to make. When I said we should not assume, as in when you're writing a documentation, you're writing a requirement, and you came up with something that you believe based on your experience. Oh, I assume this will be done. I know business will accept this. I assume development team can take care of that. So those assumptions, I said, do not do this. Better you go and talk to your business. Better you go and talk to your development team and then try to document everything. You should not write assumption. Development does not happen on your assumption or anyone's assumption, even from the business side, even from the development side. If they assume something, okay, this is something that's very pretty simple, people can accept and do things and take care. Those assumptions are big no. But when you write some of the documentation, some of the requirements, you have to assume something. Say an example, you ask business, I'm just repeating my example. What do you think? How are you going to work on a traditional waterfall way of working or an agile way of working for this project? Business is not clear at that time. But you, based on your interaction with business, you have seen businesses frequently changing the requirement. Business doesn't know in detail what is business actually want from this project. So based on the nature of the project, or based on the nature and based on your experience, you may assume, hopefully this will be done in agile way of working, because agile is the only way where we can deal with frequent changes. Where business is not clear on the requirement, business even doesn't know, business might change this requirement in future. So better we should be going to agile. So you will assume, okay, I'm assuming this project will be done in agile. So those kind of assumptions you have to write, specify so that everyone knows. And the assumption you're talking is something no one knows. You just assume something and you went ahead and then you found yourself at trouble. Assumptions should be written so that everyone knows, okay, these are assumptions that we are doing. Those things I said we have to write. Any other question?
And those assumptions can be cleared out during the meetings?
Yes, obviously, as I said, this will always be changing. Assumptions are assumptions. So we assume something, and during the in let's say you in one of the meetings or in middle of the project requirement gathering processes, you found businesses answered your question. Okay, you know what? Can you remove this assumption? We are sure we are going to go ahead and deliver things in agile. So you will write that somewhere in the documentation. This will be done in an agile way of working. I'm just giving a generic example. Could be anything. So you will remove that assumptions once it is done. Or if you have written somewhere and you have created different version of the documentation, so you would not want to remove as well. You can simply grid it out, strike through or write something else so that people know, okay, this was the before assumption. Now it is not an assumptions. So this all depends how you make that document easy to understand. So once it is cleared, that assumption will not be an assumption. That will be removed, strike through, or highlighted in different colors so that people know this was assumption. Now this is not an assumption anymore.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So next we have the characteristics of a good BRD. It is very important to write clear, concise BRD. It is very important. If you do not write this documentation clearly, if you do not specify things clearly, if this is vague, people is not able to understand, there's no way of writing the BRD. So let us see what are some of the examples of the good BRD. This has to be very clear and concise. You should not write technical jargons. Business may not understand your technical jargons. And the purpose of the BRD is to make sure everyone understands what we need. So try to avoid technical jargons or try to avoid like the complex and compound sentences and languages that no one understands. Make it simple. That's a funda. Make it simple. If you're writing something, in a way that co-technical or probably a different level of English language that no one understands, what do you mean by that? You're using those high fancy words that no one is aware about those things. You should avoid writing all those things. Make it simple. The only funda is make it very clear, very simple, and very concise that everyone can easily understand things. So that is one of the good characteristics of a BRD. That has to be complete and consistent. You would want to make sure you're writing all possible requirements. Everything is included. You don't want to miss anything. Otherwise, you will be a trouble during the UAT. Sometimes business doesn't give you the whole requirement. Based on your research, your analysis, your discussion with business and the team, you come up with things and you inform business, hey, I think you also need this thing. And then business adds those things in the requirement. So as long as it is not signed off, you're in process of writing this documentation, you may always change things there. Once it is signed off baseline, you will not. So make sure that is complete and consistent. What do you mean by consistent? Consistent as in, let's say if you're writing the same requirement at two different places, they have to be in the same manner, same language, and same understanding. You should not conflict the same requirement at two different places. Same example, business said the pen should write blue. Now, in the other example, you're writing light blue or dark blue. That is conflicting. The one place you have written just blue and other place you have written dark blue or light blue or navy. This is not good. You have to be consistent. If you're writing navy, you write navy everywhere. So that has to be very consistent. You should not be writing like one place blue, one place red. So that has to be consistent. Otherwise, this will create a big problem for you. So complete and consistent is very important. Now organize. You have to organize things. Organize as in if you're writing in a raw matter, everything is like here and there, spread all over the place. Business will not be able to understand and read it clearly. If I'm not able to read something clearly, I will not be able to understand those things. Having said, you should want to use like logical structures. You like headings, subheadings, use bulleted points, highlight things, underline things, so that it is easy for the people to navigate and understand the information what you're providing there. That is also very important. Like you see my notes here, I've written like main headings, some headings, and I've also written continues. That tells you, okay, we are continuing the business requirement document, the training. Now you see I have written the definition in a different font, different size. Now these sections are in red, and then I have bulleted these points. This is what I'm talking in organized way. So if you do not write in an organized way, this will not be easy for someone to understand, and that will also create problem. They may understand or interpret things differently. So you should not do those things. Use visuals. As I said, whenever it is possible, you should write some charts, some diagrams, some any visual aids that makes it easy to understand for anyone who is looking at those requirements. You may come up with some UI diagrams, just simple diagrams that of how this is going to look like. You may come up with some use cases. Now, since this is a business requirement documentation, you do not want to write all those technical diagrams, like DFD diagrams, all those class and object diagrams. Business may not understand things, right? So write only those visuals that is easy for the business to understand and for easy for anyone who is looking at this business requirement documentation. Use case is a perfect example. You can always write use cases, any sequence diagrams, any the state diagram, activity diagram. These diagrams are something you can use in your BRD. These are nothing but like simple flow of the data. You will tell them, okay, how the data will flow and what will be the different stages and phases of the requirement. And you can also, as I said, work with your UI UX team, and they can also give you some of the details in form of the diagrams. You can also add there. So whenever you find an opportunity, try to add those things. Review and refine. As soon as you complete capturing all the requirement, make sure you're reviewing it with your development team, with your business, and as needed, you have to revise things, change things, and you have to keep doing this by the time you're not getting signed off. So it is very important for you to keep reviewing this with different group of the people. That includes your business as well. Check the feedback and try to improve things. And you would want to make sure your stakeholders, your business feedback is considered. A stakeholder could be anyone, but the business feedback is very important because they are the one who will provide the sign off, and they are the one who are actually going ahead and accepting that project. So this is very important for you to review with them as well and consider their feedback, revise the documentation, change the language, and then once everything is done, you need to take the sign off from them, and then only you can move forward with the next steps of the software development. Right. So here's an example of the requirements. The data set will contain an end of file character. This is ambiguous. We don't know what does it mean. It doesn't tell us in detail. The product should have a good human interface. This is again non-verifiable. How would you verify? What do you mean by good human interface? So if you're writing this kind of requirement, you should avoid writing. These are not clear statements. The program shall never enter an infinite loop. What does it mean? What the hell are you talking about? What do you mean by that? I don't know. I cannot verify these requirements. So should not write this kind of requirement. This has to be clearly defined. The output of the program shall usually be given within 10 seconds. What do you mean by shall usually be given? You're assuming things, right? So let's say if it is going to 12 seconds, business will not accept this. So avoid writing in this way. Now, what is a good example? The last one, the output of a program shall be given within 20 seconds of the event 60% of the time. That's cool. 60% of the time, the requirement should be, delivered within 20 seconds. That's fine. Good example. So as a BA, we should avoid writing these kind of sentences in our requirement. We have to be very pretty clear. It's like spoon feeding, write in very clear, easy to understand language. Try to explain things in detail. Don't assume people will understand the way you're writing now. You have to make sure they understand things. So write very clearly in detail, simple, plain English language. And as a BA, you have to write a lot. Writing is one of your key skill sets. So don't avoid writing. Keep writing. Give a full detail of every requirement. Right? Examples of a bad BRD. We just have studied what are the good examples. Now we will see what are the bad examples. Obviously, it's like vice versa. Whatever we have done there, if you're not doing there, that will be a bad examples of BRD. So as we know, it is very important to have a good BRD written. If you do not have a good BRD written, this will have a significant impact on the success of the project. And we know why. We have studied before. So if you're not writing things in a structured way. Your document is unstructured or poorly organized, what will happen? This will be difficult to change. Say an example, tomorrow, if you are going to make some changes and if you have not written things in a proper way, in an organized way, you have not given sections names, numbers, bulleted, this will be even a nightmare for you. Even though you have written the document, this will be a nightmare for you to go and change those sections. That will be really difficult to change for anyone. This will be difficult to navigate to the correct section of the requirement. Let's say, as a business stakeholder, I wanted to see what are the different functional requirements. And in your documentation that is not written in a proper way, I will not be able to reach out and navigate to that point. This will be tough for me. And if I do not read it correctly, this will be difficult for me to understand. So this is very important for you to have things structured and well organized. If you don't have the headings, subheadings, bullet points, I mean, how would you make the document look good? It makes sense, understood. So you have to make sure you're doing those things properly. So if you do not have things structured or unorganized, that will be one of the classical example of your bad BRD. Lack of clarity, you're failing to communicate the project requirement. What is the requirement, the actual requirement? If that is not being effectively conveyed to the reader through that documentation, that will be not considered as a good BRD. I'm reading your documentation, but I do not understand what you mean by those things. What are you saying? If I cannot understand, that means the clarity is missing. So you have to make sure writing very clear things so that people understand. And as I said, you should avoid writing like ambiguous or incomplete information. We have just seen the examples. So those were the bad examples. So if your documentation is not clear, it is incomplete, that will be considered as a bad BRD. Missing or inaccurate information. Obviously, you are not providing all required details, or even though whatever you have written is not clear or not complete, that is also a problem. This will definitely create a scope creep, because if something is not clear, information is missing, it is inaccurate, obviously business is going to change things. And the moment business changes, business is not going to pay you, and business is not going to wait longer for you to come to the change management process and do things, deliver things, and business is not going to pay you. So this is ultimately be a scope creep, and this will be something you as a BA will be accountable. So you have to make sure you're writing things very clearly, accurate, no missing piece of the information in any of your requirements. Inconsistent, contradiction, I have told you before. Contradiction, like, is inconsistent. The same thing you're describing in a different languages at different places. Don't do these things. If you have same thing, if you have to write by any chance one common thing at so many different places, you will ensure you're writing in a same way everywhere. Do not try to describe differently at different places. That will not be a good idea for you, because at one place I may read that differently, other place I'm reading that differently, I may interpret it or take the output differently. This will be a confusing for me, so don't do this. And again, use of different terms for the same concept, making it difficult for stakeholders to understand. Obviously, the same thing, the same concept, and you're writing differently, you're using different terms. That is again is a big no. Don't do this thing. You're writing unfeasible or unrealistic requirements. Sometimes business might give you unfeasible or unrealistic requirement that cannot technically be achieved. You're still writing. That is a big no. Don't do this. You have to explain business why this is unrealistic, why this is not feasible. You have to come up with the justification. The justification could be technical, non-technical, or anything. The only point here is you have to justify why this is not possible. You don't want to sound like I don't want to do this. You would like to sound like it cannot be done. There's a huge difference. Don't sound negative. Okay, no, I cannot do this, or I don't want to do this. It's not about I don't want to do this. It's about it's not possible technically. So why it is not possible technically, you have to give the justification. So whenever you get the unfeasible or unrealistic requirements, talk to your development team. Try to find out what is something we can do differently. Is there a way we can deliver things not the way business wants, but probably in a different way? And then based on your research, you go back to business and tell them and document those things clearly in your business requirement document. Do not try to simply take unfeasible or unrealistic requirement because business is pushing you or whatsoever the reason. Don't do this. If you're doing it, it's a bad example and it is not a good BRD. And obviously, if you do not have acceptance criteria, we have studied before what is acceptance criteria and what is the importance. If you do not have the acceptance criteria, this will be really difficult to measure on what basis business is going to accept these things. You will be a trouble, your team will be a trouble. So you make sure you're writing good acceptance criteria, functional requirement, and what criteria based on those business will be accepting those functional or non-functional requirements. You have to write very clearly. If you're not writing, that will not be a good example of a BRD. Here's a sample. As I said, I'll give you one sample. This sample is not written by me. This is written by IEEE. There's one of the organization that has suggested a lot of good documentation, and these are free to use. Everybody can use it. So what happens normally, companies, they take reference from this documentation and they create their own version. So in simple, there's no one common document that is being used across organizations. No, this is technically not possible. Every company works differently. Every team works differently. So they may have to modify things that fits well for their nature of the project. So there's no one common business requirement document that you can master and you can use everywhere in all your companies. Probably you might be using the same document in all your projects within the same organization, but not possible to do that. You will be using the same document in all the organizations. So every org may have a different version of the documentation. That's what I've written here. There's no one size fits all format for business requirement documentation. What does it mean? It means there's no any one single document that can be that can fit for every company's requirement. It's technically not possible. So what they do, they refer these sections and they come up with their own section. They may add something new, they may remove something new, they may reorganize things, they may have something at the top, they may move something at the back, at the bottom, I meant. So these are some of the fields that you might be using differently in different companies. Now on the format, I believe you don't have to worry more about that because every company has one format and that you will find in their repository. Most of the CMMI level 5 companies, they all have one department. They actually work on the versions of the documentation and they release different versions. And those versions will only be used regardless of the teams within that organization. So you will already have something with you. You only have to go ahead and write details within those sections. You don't have to worry about the sections and creating a new documentation for the company. Unless there's a startup, new company is there, and that company does not have any documentation, then probably they may ask you to come up with one of the format. Then it is up to you what information you would like to add in that document. You can go ahead. Most of the time, you will have something already written in the format size, and then probably you can go ahead and start writing your details within those predefined sections in that document. So here you see the first thing it says revision history. This revision history, I've given you one example at the right hand side of the screen. You will see revision history is nothing but to let the viewer or readers know at what point in time what revision was made to the documentation, who made it, who reviewed it, and what actually we changed. So if you see, the first thing is 0.1D. This was the initial document. I've written it as a draft. Draft as in this is not the released version. Draft is like I'm still working. However, I'm sharing with you to review, but it is not officially released. It is a draft version, so I may change a lot of things. You can go ahead, feel free to read it out, provide your feedback, but do not consider it as a final released version. So that's why we want to write this D there. Now you may ask me, is that something every company follows? I would say no. Every company has their own way of doing versionings. They may write things differently. I'm just giving you one example that how different versions are being written. So the initial document is 0.1D I've written. That was released on March 15, and or probably March 15 I started working. Who started working? It's me. I've written my name there. Did someone review and approve? No, because this is the initial document. Now on March 27, I released one official document as a 1.0 version. Now this document has latest version at 1.0. Who reviewed it? Mike Huffman, probably my manager or someone who has approving authority, has reviewed the document and approved. And I can also write the date, what date Mike Hoffman has reviewed. I did not write the date here, but then you can write the date anytime. Maybe it could be the same date, most of the time same date, because this is going to the business, or this has been released for the internal purposes. You may have different dates. I don't know. Now, what is the comment? Comment said this was the first released version of the document. Now we released this 1.0, someone reviewed and provided you feedback. And based on the feedback, I went ahead and added one new section in the documentation, which is I updated section 5 of the functional requirement, and I added one new functional requirement, which is FR5. Just giving you a generic example, this could completely change. So what I added a new business requirement there. So how would different people know what was the change here? So I will have to write this specifically, clearly, so that if someone is going to go ahead and see the revision history, they will easily know, okay, now what is the latest version of the document is 1.1. Within 1.1, what is new? Section 5 was updated and new functional requirement was added. If I go and see the version 1.0, I will not consider this new change. Under 1.1, which is the latest version of the document, these were the changes were made. Who made it? When was it made? Who reviewed and approved? So I have been given 1.1 version, and I know this was the change. So I can simply go to that section of like business requirement documentation, section 5. Under section 5, I can see what is FR5 is talking all about. So this will be easy for me to understand what was changed. If you do not write these revision histories, this will be really difficult for someone to figure out what was changed. Why are you giving me a new version of the documentation? Example, let's say if I have 1 or 2 pages of the document, fine, I can read everything. If I have 200 pages, do you really believe this will be easy for me to find out what you have changed and read unless you give me the clear instructions? So this is very important to write revision history. Nowadays, we have online tools as well, like GitHub, you might have heard. These are the tools being used for the versionings of different things. There could be document versions, software release versions, a lot of things are there. You might see people using those tools as well in the company to write all those versionings, but this will we always be in the document as well, because you're sharing this document. So document should tell exactly what you have done. I just thought to take some time and give you the importance of the revision history. That's the reason I'm talking it right now. Now let's move back to this the format. So in the format, you'll see the first section has introduction. Within the introduction, we have purpose. What is the purpose of the document? What is the document conventions that you would want to write clearly, define things, and let the people know. And then you have who will be the audience of this document, you are going to share this document with. So you will also write their names here. What is the project scope and any references? Now references could be anything. You might have received one document from business as an initial business requirement document. You will also attach that document to your business requirement document as a reference. You may have done some of the meetings and you have created some MOMs. We have studied before in the previous class. You may also want to include or attach that MOM in your business requirement documentation as a reference point. Anything you can write. You can write any email communications, any statements in the reference section. So reference section may have attachments, statements, anything that is supporting your business requirement documentation. Now, how will you organize this thing? This section will completely depending upon what org you're working and how they have organized things. They may have seen, you might see under introduction, you might see under some other sections, but you most probably going to see these sections in your documentations. Now, what is the overall description? You have to write what is the product perspective, the features, all those user classes, characteristics, everything. You will write system features. You will write external interface requirements like GUI. We call it graphical user interface. You will also write some functional, non-functional, hardware, software, all those requirements. You may have some other requirements as well. You may have something which is like if you see the glossary point, this will have like description of something that is common across the teams, common across the org. So your company would like to add those things as well in the documentation. Anything. You may write some the verbiage is, let's say if you're using BRD. So what is BRD? You would also want to add one section at the bottom that tells, okay, whenever you see BRD, I meant business requirement document. When you see GUI, I meant graphical user interface. All those abbreviation you will also write in the documentation. So this is just a generic example. You may come up with your own version of the requirement if your company does not have one already in place. Most of the time, you will have one certainly written already, and you will use that documentations. Any questions here?
No.
Cool.
No,
What is the purpose of a BID in software development? Give me one answer, please.
it's C.
It's D. Provide D.
Okay, let's see what is the answer. C, to capture the requirement of stakeholders. Blueprint is something different. Blueprint is not the requirement documentation. It's like you're giving a high level, something that customer can feel. This might be a document as well, but this is certainly not a business requirement document. So you are writing the business stakeholders requirement there. You're not writing the timeline and budget. Timeline budget is a separate document that comes based on this document. And this document may not have all those technical expectation, specification. As I said, this will be for the business. This will be a business language thing. So technical specification might be there, might not be there. That depends if your organization has SRS or not. But definitely the answer C is the correct, to capture the requirement of the stakeholders. What is the key component of a BRE that outlines the detailed functionality of the software?
D.
We have studied like many key components. So which one is the key component that will talk more about the functionality of the software?
D.
Okay, any other answer?
It's D.
Okay, let's see the answer. Yes, D. The functional requirement is the only key component that will talk about the functionality of the software. Every functionality goes under functional requirement section. So that's true. Cool. Right, so I think we're at the end of this course. This is the tips I always give you guys. I have given you, explained to you many times in the previous videos. I'm not going to explain it right now. Unless you have any questions, you can ask. Otherwise, I'm going to skip this section. The project summary, we have studied this before as well. This talks about what is a good requirement is going to do for you. So we have studied this in detail. This is just a summary. What is the benefit of a good project requirement documentation. If you're writing in a scope, out of scope, how it's going to help you, how this will help you identify the risks, how this will help you to control the scope of the project. This page talks more about like high level summary, so you can take some time and you can read this out. It's pretty simple, self-explanatory. If you have any questions, you can comment. I can answer your questions. Thank you very much, all of you, for your time. We'll talk to you in the next meeting next week. Bye.
Thank you.